Former Republican Vice President and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney is backing Kamala Harris. That marks one of her most high-ranking Republican endorsements in this campaign, probably the most iconic. Dick Cheney is an arch-conservative hawk, a GOP icon, a fixture running Republican administrations as chief of staff, and then running their war policies as defense secretary and vice president, most famously during 9/11 and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Those were stints that made him a firebrand folk hero on the right and loathed by most prominent Washington Democrats. Indeed, this news right now tonight would have been unheard of 10 or 15 years ago. And we should remind you, Cheney is far from a never-Trumper. He endorsed Donald Trump in 2016. This is a mark amidst this extraordinary shift in American politics. It also completes the Cheney family's unusual evolution. And it did not come during the actual 4 years of Trump's presidency, his governing priorities and mistakes, whatever you think of them. It only came during the battle in the fissure over whether we are going to be a democracy or a coup-run dictatorship in this country. It came in that period after Trump lost to Joe Biden and fomented an insurrection. You probably recall how Liz Cheney went from the actual Republican leadership, working in tandem with Trump, to a critic of him, to then chairing the January 6th committee investigating his attack. Now her father joins this stance, which puts democracy above politics or any certain policies, and as a political matter, may be hugely helpful to Kamala Harris in a tight race that includes states where there are people who still really like the Bush-Cheney policies or hearken back to them as a better Republican era than Trumpism. And if that's what they hearken back to, Dick Cheney is telling them, vote for Kamala Harris tonight. Liz and Dick, we should mention, have a long record disagreeing with Kamala Harris on everything from abortion to taxes. But they're saying something here is more important tonight. Liz Cheney actually broke this news in an appearance today with journalist Mark Leibovich.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. Do you, if you know who he will be supporting or who he'll be voting for, do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Okay. Wow.
Wow is right. You can hear the cheers, which happen to reflect the room she was in. She could have been in a more independent room, and there might have been a mixed reaction, or she could have been in a Republican room, a MAGA room, and people would have had their own reaction. All those reactions, real or imagined, though, reflect the fact that this is a big deal. You heard Leibovich, a straight reporter, saying, wow, this is a big one. We already knew how many top Republican officials had skipped this year's MAGA RNC, and that some have clearly not wanted more Trump. But they also have not done what I'm reporting to you Liz Cheney just announced about Dick Cheney. They have not publicly backed the Democratic nominee during the voting period and pre-period where people make up their minds. Take George W. Bush. We know from reporting he ultimately voted against Trump last cycle, but he did it with a write-in choice, and he avoided any major campaigning. In other words, whatever sway or political capital he had as a former president, he didn't use it. He just didn't want to vote for Trump. His vice president, Dick Cheney, who is famously loud, muscular, rough in government politics and bureaucracy, is doing what Dick Cheney does. He may have even thought about it and decided that Liz Cheney is the right person to make this announcement in what might seem like a natural forum rather than something more orchestrated or political. And he knows that Liz Cheney is the current more active carrier of the Cheney brand in today's politics rather than going into the sort of throwback emeritus retirement mode. Elections are about choices. Publicly announcing them can make a difference. And Cheney has opposed Trump's attack on democracy without going this far before. He had not shared his conservative credentials to help a Biden or a Harris, although when Liz Cheney was in her primary, he was clear about the danger of Trump.
There has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He is a coward. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters. He lost his election, and he lost big. I know it, he knows it, and deep down, I think most Republicans know it.
Do they, though? Again, that was a certain type of argument, and that was a bit of family business in the campaign. This goes farther than family business, and people don't make up their minds in a vacuum. This public stance by both Cheneys now could matter. It's also the first week of the traditional general election, so more announcements like this could be coming. And we are joined now by Quentin Fulks, Principal Deputy Campaign Manager for the Harris campaign. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Absolutely. Your reaction to what is absolutely unusual. You think about the Bush-Cheney era, Dick Cheney, through his daughter, endorsing Kamala Harris.
Look, I think that it speaks to the fact that people understand what's at stake in this election. It is literally the future of our country. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of people who have supported Donald Trump in the past, realizing just how dangerous he is. And we have to continue to communicate that. But these people who are unusually endorsing a Democratic candidate, they understand the stakes of this election. And as I've said before, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, a former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, said it doesn't make you a Democrat by voting for Kamala Harris if you're a Republican. It makes you a patriot. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing, and we're seeing people stand up for the future of this country.
The Harris campaign has previewed some of the debate strategy. Of course, we'll all be watching Tuesday. 2025, drawing a contrast. And she also seems to be, through her aides, arguing that Trump's not up to the job. Is there an argument here that he's too old, that there is a visible cognitive decline?
Look, all those things are true. Donald Trump is unfit to be president of the United States. But one thing that is true is that Donald Trump is a pretty skilled debater. This will be his 7th presidential debate, the most of any candidate in modern presidential history. And this will be Vice President Harris's first. And we know Donald Trump is practicing harder than ever for this debate. And so the vice president will be prepared and come ready. But we know that Donald Trump is going to show up, too, and we know that he's been practicing.